Welcome back to the Ultimate Cleveland Sports Show.
What up, though?
What's up,
YouTube?
man? What's up, chat?
What up, YouTube? What it do?
Hey, listen, I'm sorry we just bombarded you. We was throwing gang signals up. But Big Nuggets, let's get into this question. We quite didn't understand where you was going with. Draft is coming up. So set this one up in terms of our criteria and what we're talking about with these talent traits versus tape.
Yeah, so when you're looking at NFL draft prospects, we have a profile and all this data on everybody, right? You look at guys who produce crazy in college. We have those numbers. We have guys who may not produce crazy in college and then go to the combine and out-test everybody and have crazy vertical jumps, crazy 40-yard dashes, and next thing you know, they become a draft darling. And we could look at all the combine freaks and exceptions over the years. Guys like Anthony Richardson, some have panned out, some haven't. Calvin Johnson's a guy who tested incredibly well at the combine, went on to have one of the best careers in all of football. So without using specific players, I'm more just asking from a philosophical standpoint. And Zach, you did a little scouting in the NFL level, so I was waiting for you to be on the panel for this. How do you weigh production on the college level versus those physical traits when you're trying to make an evaluation of what a college prospect can become on the NFL level?
Yeah, I mean, if you don't have outstanding physical traits, it's going to be really tough to succeed in the NFL. But when you're talking about college guys and how they might fit, production is paramount. There are some reasons that guys don't do it, but if they didn't produce on that level, if they didn't have dominant seasons and dominant stretches, how are you going to project them to be dominant against the very best players in the world? So it is different by position, and there are circumstances. Nico Collins is a name that comes to mind, right? We'd agree, one of the 8-10 best receivers in the league, big and fast guy. He played at Michigan. They didn't throw the ball. They didn't throw it well when they did, right? So each guy's circumstance is different. But, let's go back to Nick Chubb. He shared the backfield at Georgia, right? He had the injury history. But when you turned on the tape, what did Nick Chubb do? Ran through people, tossed them off of them, right? That was a guy that was going to do it. And it came down to the Seahawks picked a running back out of San Diego State, and Nick Chubb dropped to the Browns. It was history. So you need to have done it at the highest level. The guys that go in the first round absolutely won the genetic lottery.
Right.
In almost all cases. And absolutely are in the top percentage of the traits. But especially now in the more data-driven NFL, it's become easier and teams have become smarter to pick out not just one-year wonders, not just workout wonders, guys that have done it at the very highest level.
Yeah. So, I really didn't understand the question either, so shout out to you for kind of setting that up. For me, when I look at wide receivers, for example, right, ever since I've seen Josh Gordon play at his highest level, it was always like, well, damn, I want my wide receivers to be built just like that. And that's a position that I think about to where as long as you give me a guy that has those traits, even if the college production isn't as high, I believe that it's something else that went into that. Mike brought up Calvin Johnson, and that was a guy that I thought about to where when he was in college, he was not really a household name. He wasn't a guy that many people knew a lot about him. But when he got to the NFL, baller, right? One of the best wide receivers I ever seen play. And that's an example that I think about to where, maybe he had a quarterback who couldn't get him the ball. And then these other examples of guys that win the top 10, like Darius Hayward-Bay, who, could fly, can run like a deer. And everybody knew Al Davis. If you ran a 4.2 40, you was about to be an Oakland Raider. That's just how it went down. So he went number 7 overall, right? So he went number 7 overall, and it never panned out, even though he had the traits and those intangibles. So when you talk about advanced data and being able to, be able to see, okay, this guy's a one-year wonder, or this guy just got the opportunity to start because it was better guys in front of him, and now you see the production and you can say, okay, this projects to the next level. They have done a much better job, in my opinion, in being able to do that. But I would trust somebody that's built like a Josh Gordon, for example. I would be more intrigued with somebody that has those type of traits.
Your traits will give you a shot. So what I mean by that is if you got elite traits, you may not necessarily have the best tape. You may not necessarily play in a system that highlights those traits so that you can be put in a position to have a bunch of production. But that's what pro days and combines is for, because you can take a chance on a guy with elite traits and then lean on your staff to say, can we coach him up to do some certain things? Maybe he was put in a different position at that specific college. Get case in point, Mason Graham is playing a completely different style of defense right now than he played at Michigan. And so your goal is to say, okay, well, we want him to do something different. How can we project that? Does he have the baseline aptitude to be able to switch over and do those things? So for me, the first and foremost is it's always the tape. Like, first and foremost, like, that is what the Bible is. It's what you base everything off of. And then when you go watch them run and work out, that is either going to confirm certain things, or you have to go back and look at it to say, if you ran a 4.3, right, and I thought you was a 4.5 guy, now I want to go back and look at it a little bit and be like, I didn't think he was that going to run it. Or on the opposite end is if you run a 4.5, but you out here moving around like Cardinal Tate, you always behind the defense. I got to figure out, is that because they're scheming you open well? Do you have a great quarterback throwing it to you? Is that you? And can I get that same level of production if the traits don't add up to the tape?
When Harold Fannin was at Bowling Green, he was setting records, not just tight end records, but like national reception records. And so the counterpoint was, well, he's playing at Bowling Green. Well, the counterpoint to that is everybody in every stadium knew that he was coming. And yes, the safeties and linebackers on the mat couldn't cover him, but 3 of them were trying, and he was still catching 12 balls a game, right? So as long as you went and checked out, he's a good enough athlete. Probably better athlete than people thought. He runs a little goofy. He's a natural football player, right? You see his background in other positions show up. Like, the production is what gets you noticed. So it is different for different players. There are guys who haven't produced, but so many times you'll see guys that are like a surprise on the outside slip to the 4th or 5th round. Well, the scouts have watched the tape and they wonder why there isn't more production. So if there's not a great valid excuse that this team just was not throwing him the ball,
right,
or he just was behind a certain guy, like, they want to see more on those guys slip.
It's funny because on one side of the coin, I think about a guy like Josh Allen, where if you mirror that to what this question is, he had the physical tools. But if you read a lot of the write-ups about him coming out, a lot of people said he didn't have one elite trait about him. And he also didn't play against the best competition. Well, with some coaching and some time given, Josh Allen turned out to be all right. And I think about, a guy that's coming up now, Cardinal Tate, right? And he was in the Off the Clock space, and shout out to the Off the Clock boys. And he talked about, somebody asked him, what type of coverage really gave him issues. And he said that at Ohio State, a lot of people didn't play press man against those Buckeye wide receivers, right? And so because he has elite traits, he's a route running technician, even when he sees more of that in the NFL, scouts and people who make these decisions are going to be comfortable with him, taking him wherever they take him because of that elite trait, despite never seeing that much type of coverage, and despite not having this 4.2, 4.3, 40 that everybody think is a big deal, when in reality, it's about how you get in and out of your breaks that matter more than your 40 times.
Garrett touched on this, but I think every year with like the top 50, 75 players, I think they look and they get that published 40 time, and they know. It's almost always in the neighborhood because they know, because they've scouted them. The guys have played multiple years against the best competition. So when they have to go back and look, is if there's a circumstance. Was there an injury, or is it way off of what they thought, right? Like, a guy doesn't go to the combine and run 4.29 and they thought he was going to run 4.7.
Yeah, it's just...
and it's kind of the same way as, like, nobody really cares if Cardinal Tate is 4.41 or 4.54. If it's one way or the other, but they're like, okay, he's not the fastest, but guess what? He goes and gets the ball. He extends to get that. He knows how to get over.
Guys, I will say that, but here's the position where all bets are off. You could do that for corners, like receivers, and if a defensive lineman got a tool or tricks and his get off is crazy, you're like, oh, all right, we could take him. But when it comes to that quarterback position, all bets are off. It's like your best idea of what he can be could be wildly this side or wildly this side. You brought up a great point. Go back and listen and watch that class that when the Browns took Baker. You had Baker, Sam Darnold, Josh Allen,
and Josh Rosen
and Lamar Jackson. all of those guys were not separated by a lot. And all of those quarterbacks had different traits. Like Josh Allen had the crazy arm, but it was the competition people thought about and the lack of experience. Baker had the moxie. His was the intangible. He was, the presence. And then Lamar Jackson was Lamar Jackson. He was the next Vic. He was Vic reincarnated. And then Josh Rosen was the dude who had played since he was a freshman with all kind of great stats in the longevity. And so you saw all of those quarterbacks, and everybody had a different thought process. But look at the way it turned out. Mm-hmm. There's no book on a quarterback, and that's why that's the one that is the most difficult to get.
Josh Allen's an outlier for a couple reasons. One, he just has those crazy gifts. But two, the Bills raised him right.
Yeah.
Like the throws that Baker made in his sleep in college that made him the number one pick, they were teaching Josh Allen to make that throw for multiple years.
Right.
Just take the drop, hit the guy right now, take what's there. Like he just wasn't accurate, right? He was relying on his gifts too much against that competition. It was impossible to say, can do this. And I think ultimately the Browns judged that he wasn't ever going to be accurate enough. The Browns probably weren't going to raise him right. The Bills did. They reaped the rewards. They got a Hall of Fame quarterback, right? They haven't got to the Super Bowl yet, but every year they're knocking on the door. So, yeah, that's like Drew Aller this year, the local kid from Medina. His career didn't go that way. He's got great gifts. Does he have Josh Allen gifts? No. Are they in the zip code? Yes. Some team's going to draft Drew Aller in the 4th round, despite his having a nightmare year, despite him never winning a big game, and they're going to give him every chance. And maybe after 6 months or maybe after 3 years, they'll determine it wasn't work, but the upside of it working is that you have a quarterback, right? Like that was what's maddening about the Dylan Gabriel pick. He was a finished product.
Yeah,
he was 6 years, right? He was 5'10",
if that,
right? And so really when you go back and listen to what Barry and Stefanski said, what did they say? This was a great college quarterback. And it was, unquestionably, he was a great college quarterback. He produced 3 different stops. But he gets in the NFL, he just doesn't have the gifts. So you have to continuously develop, and you have to have those physical traits if you're ever going to take that next step up. So they drafted a career backup with a top 100 pick.
It's just, and then you look at it, and another thing that you take a look at is age, transfers. I mean, he went from UCF, then he went to Oklahoma, then he went to Oregon. And when you get somebody who's playing, and that goes to show you, it also has a lot to do with who you're playing with. In college, more than ever, I watch, and I'm not saying Mendoza's not going to be bad, right? Mendoza had crazy offensive line. The system was exactly to what his strengths were. 2 good running backs, 2 really good receivers. Like sometimes you can look a certain way and then get to the league and be like, oh.
Sure, but also those guys allowed him to take that next step in his own game.
Yes.
Because he wasn't at Cal anymore.
I was about to bring that up.
Right? Now he's playing for a better coach. Now he's playing with 2 drafted receivers. So he's allowed to get to that next step.
And he could develop. And it all depends on who you got around. And then coaching matters as well. Like, there's a lot of coaches who you bring a guy in and they tell you to run what you're going to run. Right?
That's right.
But some coaches bring you in and say, hey, what can this guy do well? Let's do a good job of coaching him up and getting him and masking those deficiencies, so to speak.
It's funny when you talk about like even if you bring offensive linemen into this conversation. What was that dude name? What was it? Robert Gallery?
Robert Gallery.
Remember him?
Yeah.
And Robert Gallery had all the physical tools. He just looked the part of a guy who was going to be a dominant tackle in the NFL for a long time, but something was off about him. Something was missing. And when it comes to offensive linemen, I think that, you want to see them have those physical tools and traits. But I've learned and just talked to some of my friends that played in the league that you want your offensive line group to be some of the most intelligent people on your football team, because those are the guys that more often than not is making the initial checks at the line of scrimmage. Those are the guys that is studying the technique of the guys that's in the trenches with them on the other side of the ball. And so, for an offensive lineman, you want them to be big, physical, and strong. But if they don't have that football IQ, then that don't matter.
Hey, quarterback's quarterback, and those are the guys that make $400 million. But you know what to tell you the second toughest position to find is? Second. Because you got to have a guy who's big enough, right? He's got to be able to shotgun snap. He's got to be able to take on a 320-pound guy, and he's got to make the checks, whether that guy's to his left, whatever.
In 2 seconds.
In 2 seconds.
And You were at the the owners meetings, and you guys had an opportunity because I talked to Jason, and when you guys spoke to them, this is very fascinating. Do you have a good idea if the Browns like any of these tackles? I just feel like they're just kind of blah on all of them. I don't think that. I think that some of them have some good traits, some of them have some bad traits. What did you get from that?
I don't think that we got a tip in terms of what the Browns think, but I think I came away believing that maybe the league is not sold in general. So it's going to be personal preference. I think when you look at Andrew Berry's track record, I think you can connect Monroe Freeling and Caden Proctor to the Browns. I think there's probably not a strong feeling that any of these guys would go in the top 5 in another draft. So what's Arizona going to do? What's Tennessee going to do? Who's going to be there? And if it's the Browns, are they going to take the long-term view and take the best lineman because none of them went in the top 5? Or are they going to say, hey, we're good on the right side for the next year or two, or at least they should be, considering what they committed, and then they're going to take that guy later. So Spencer Fano is a left tackle 1 year in college, played other positions. When he went to the combine and they had him working out at center, that didn't scream number 6 pick in the draft to me.
Yeah, that's kind of crazy. Like when they tap you on the shoulder, hey, how you feel about kicking down the shoulder some snaps?
But it's all your situation.
Right.
If Spencer Fano's there at 14 and the Ravens say, we don't care, we want you to play 2 or 3 spots over the course of your career, we're going to take you, versus if it's 6, like, you're thinking you're going to get the next Joe Thomas.
So you said, it's personal preference based on what you got, just from talking to people. And the one thing, like with Andrew Berry, that kind of makes me uneasy is he has a tendency to draft tackles that play on the right side, and he think that, he likes guys with versatility, and he think, you can just kick them on this side. But when I hear Todd Monken talk, it seems like that he's in line with that thought process that Andrew Berry has, to where, just draft a good offensive lineman, and myself and Warhop and Schweitzer can do what we have to do to get those guys ready. So when you talk about them having personal preference, it sounds like it doesn't have to be a guy that has primarily played on the left side.
It doesn't have to be, but you made a commitment to a 30-year-old guy who says, I'm a right tackle.
Yeah.
And like Zion Johnson has played both sides, but for the last 3 years, he played left guard. So where are these guys going to fit? We don't know. And the Browns are not drafting necessarily a guy for this year for week 1. I think the stat is 25 teams last year, guys. Their 5 offensive line on snap 1 week 1 played less than 50% of the snaps for the season. So that's why they have valued this versatility. But in terms of making a pick that's going to follow you and going to shape your offensive line for years to come, if you draft a guy that's redundant or it doesn't work out, then that's dangerous.
It's dangerous that the 2 biggest needs on this team are wide receiver and offensive lineman, and the blind spot seems to be offensive line and wide receiver.
That's right. But also, Garrett, if you had 9 studs and you were thinking you were going to play in the AFC Championship game this year, then you would say, yes, they're definitely taking a left tackle or a wide receiver. You're not in that situation, which opens it up more. You add in the fact that nobody really seems to have a consensus on who's going to a 5. Like, I came away thinking, like, this is wide open. And also that people are low enough, I think, on all the tackles that the Browns might have their choice. Like, no tackles might go in the top 5. So if the Browns really want one, they're in position to potentially get who they want.
Outside of tackle, let me ask you this. I believe that the Cleveland Browns should draft 2 wide receivers with their first 4 picks. How do you see that?
Yeah, I would probably lean 2 tackles over 2 wide receivers. But if they don't get Carnell Tate, and either they don't want him or he goes in the top 5, then I think that's definitely in play, because I think the general thought on this draft class is it's more deep than top heavy at receiver, and the Browns need a lot of help. And again, if they have to play this year without a number 1 wide receiver, that's fine. It's about the future. Like, who in this receiving group is even going to be on this team in 27? Isaiah Bond, assuming he makes progress. That's the only one you can say with any certainty, because Judy's not tradable right now. He's dumpable after this year. Cedric Tillman only has a contract for this year. Who else? We're talking now. We're in the Malachi Corley, Tyler Wallace category.
You don't want to get to the mountain.
You're looking at another season of Harold Fannin being your number 1 receiver.
Listen, I'll tell you, we'll find out. Draft less than 16 days away. We will be all over it, and make sure you check out Ultimate Cleveland Sports Show YouTube, and make sure you download the WKYC Plus app. When we get back, guys, we switch topics. We switch gears a little bit. We get into the Cleveland Guardians. Jose Ramirez, all-time leader in games played. What is he most known for? What memory stands out to you guys We'll come back and talk about that next on UCS.